Welcome to the Legal Insurrection Podcast. Today's January 24th, and this is our 21st episode. I'm Kimberly Kay, and I'm our Operations and Editorial Director with the Legal Insurrection Foundation, and I'm here with Professor William Jacobson, our president and founder. So let's go ahead and get started. So much to cover. I mean, it's been a couple weeks since we've sat down to kind of discuss the headlines and things that are happening, and obviously a lot's happened with the inauguration. Little bit sad. We were hoping to bring you live inaugural coverage, but then they moved it indoors, which ultimately I think was the best decision for many, many reasons. So we decided to stay home. But we have a lot to cover today. And I think we start from the beginning, which would be the inauguration and the fact that we're only a couple of days in here, but it seems like Trump has been president for a very long time already. So, what were your thoughts on Inauguration Day? I know it was a little bit different from inaugural events past.
I enjoyed it a lot. I don't think I've watched as much cable TV in a year as I did on Inauguration Day, just to be able to take it all in. And I think it's a different Trump this time. He seems more organized, seemed more focused. I thought the indoor setting was really perfect in many ways. I thought the ceremony itself was great. I thought his um, inaugural address was like in the face of the people sitting behind him to his left, okay, about the failures. I think all around it was a great day. I was very impressed, and this is really why I watched so much of the TV. He immediately went to work. He is signing executive orders both in the afternoon and the evening. Real theater like atmosphere with people all around him, and then he'd hold them up. So I was impressed with the whole day and the whole way it went down. And I think it was a very fast start to his presidency.
Well, I mean, I think, and I know we've talked about this in episodes past. He has had 4 years waiting in the wings while he has been persecuted politically, personally, and in every way possible. Not just him, but all of his closest allies have suffered the same fate. And he's had time to plan and plot and prepare for this, and he also had his first 4 years, I think, of being completely disillusioned to what he was walking into in the DC swamp. And he came in swinging. I mean, I know it's a small thing, but for I think many people, it's not a small thing. Even watching how they so quickly reorganized and moved things indoors and managed to do so in a way that didn't kill the parade. All of these people who came in from all over the country, the high school bands and the different fire departments and first responders and all of these different things were still able to participate in the day. And then for him to sit down and start signing executive orders in front of all the people and throwing the pins, this is like peak Trump in every way possible. And I loved it, and we watched it. Same thing, like we don't do much TV at all. So one of the best live streams that we've seen, we watched, I think it was the Joint Committee or Joint Chiefs. I can't remember what congressional committee's in charge of all of this. And they had two people who lead Capitol Hill tours. And they just had such a wealth of information. There was no political commentary. Any commentary they had to offer was purely historical about parts of the building and how things were done historically and when traditions changed and why they changed and how they changed. And it was just so good. Everything about the day just seemed so wholesomely American. And I loved every bit about the ceremony itself. Franklin Graham bringing the heat. He's talking about enemies that are sitting literally like 3 feet away. And even Trump's speech doing the exact same thing. They do not care. Like they just do not care this time around. And I love it because the only way you deal with people like this, the only way you deal with this kind of mentality is you have to punch it in the face. And you have to tell them you are 100% serious. And I think that's the Trump we get this time around, and it's the only Trump we can have this time around. Because like we've discussed in episodes past, we came so close to the brink of destruction as a nation, and we like there is no time to waste. And going through and bulldozing all of the hazards that put us in this situation. So I have loved to see that.
Yeah, I mean, one of the things that impressed me uh, at how different it is now, in the evening signing, he was in the Oval Office, I presume. It looked like the Oval Office, and spent 2 hours signing. And in between each signing, he'd have a few minutes back and forth with the reporters in the room. And
Yeah.
we haven't had a president in 4 years who will interact with the media, much less the public. And he was really on his game. He's talking about a million different things. The reporters are throwing questions at him, not in the obnoxious way that like Jim Acosta used to do, but a legitimate way. What about this? What about this? What are you going to do about this? What are you? And he was back and forth for 2 hours while he's signing in between signing executive orders. And only afterwards did I see a photo of what the room looked like. It was packed with cameras and reporters. You didn't really get that sense when you were watching it live because the camera was just
Right.
on him. But he was almost like in a semicircle, three or four reporters deep with cameras and everything. We haven't had a president who can have an intelligent conversation in 4 years. And I feel like he's come into his own. He's enjoying this. Because he not only clearly won the election by an electoral vote landslide and won the popular vote, and because the resistance is, I think, exhausted in many ways, I think he's enjoying himself more, certainly more than he did the first time. And so I was very impressed with that, and I hope people appreciated that we have an extremely transparent and open president. We did in his first term, and we haven't had that in 4 years. We've had somebody who hides either in a basement or behind scripts and is escorted out by handlers. And he was there for 2 hours, just back and forth with the media. I thought it was quite extraordinary.
I completely agree. And he's just so candid, and there aren't questions that he won't answer. He's not, we never get a no comment from him. In fact, he usually talks more than he probably should, but you always know exactly what he thinks and where he stands. I think the only thing was, and this was actually pretty funny, when he found a letter that was left from Biden in the desk, and he said he would read it and talk about it later. You
Well,
know,
only because one of the reporters
yes,
said, "Did you get the letter?" And he said, "No." And I think it was the reporter said, "Why don't you check the desk drawer?"
yeah,
And he opened the drawer, and there is the
it
envelope. He
was
said,
so
"I'm not going to
funny.
open it right here and now." But yeah, I mean, so it's really unbelievable. But it was a whole day, and the executive orders that were signed were really Trump's shock and awe. He has signed
Yes.
it on so many different topics. He has signed a lot of them. He is going head on to undo the Obama Biden legacy. And let's make clear, it's really more the Obama legacy. Biden was a puppet who was run by Obama's people in his term as president. And Trump came right out. And I don't know how other people are feeling, but there's been so much that's happened. We're only 5 days into a 1,461-day presidency. And if he keeps up this pace, uh, I'm already exhausted. I'm not tired of winning yet, but I'm exhausted. And I think the left and the media, I don't know if they can handle it. This is a different Trump. This is a more organized Trump. This is a more methodical Trump. This is someone who has planned out a lot of these moves in advance. Remember Project 2025? It was a real thing, okay? Can we all admit now it was real? And he's implementing it, and people are going crazy, at least from what I'm seeing on social media. They
But
don't
what
know how
can
to
they
handle it.
And I think one of the things this time, it's like I keep waiting for the other shoe to drop, right? Because the left and progressivism is so good about doing that. But I think they were so soundly trounced this election and every single benchmark of wokeism, not just ideologically, but they lost politically. And I don't know how they recover from this. I don't know how far right they have to swing. And if they have to swing rightward, then how does that distinguish them outside of abortion, which is always, their calling card and their hill to die on in perpetuity? But I don't know. I think they're probably, I believe they're genuinely in shock, and yes, they're outraged at some of the things that are happening while the rest of the country is breathing a sigh of relief that sanity is returning rapidly so. This is not something we're having to wait on. He immediately gets to work securing the southern border. He immediately gets to work deporting violent criminals that we know are in our country. He immediately gets to work reversing Biden policies, all of the pernicious DEI stuff that we work on day in day out. I mean, he gets to work within hours before he even goes to party and the fancy little ball at night. He's already working, and it's just such a refreshing thing to see. And one of the things that, because when Trump was elected the first time, I really was hardcore opposed to the idea of his presidency, but he really grew on me over time. And one of the areas in which he grew on me was that he was constantly focused on the American people in a way that we just don't see politically ever. Politicians will talk about the people, but they don't ever do anything for the people. At the end of the day, they're still trying to get reelected. And that's just not Trump's way because he's not a politician. I mean, he's just not. Even his first term showed us he's just not a politician. So at least for me, I think it's just such a welcome change. And it was so fun to watch with my kids too. My son calls him President Trunk, and he's also 5, and I will not correct him until he figures that out on his own because it's adorable. But they enjoyed watching a lot of it too, and the parade, and all of the festivities, and all of that. So, but any last thoughts on that before we kind of jump in more to his executive orders and some of the stuff he's tackled already?
The only thing I will comment on is Melania's fashion.
Oh, I
Um,
loved it. I loved every bit of it.
maybe you can be better at that, but you compare the photo of Melania 2017 inauguration, happy pink outfit, pinkish outfit, rose out color outfit, and this one where I forget what the cartoon character is, but there's a cartoon character that has a similar hat. Um,
Yeah.
and forget Trump. Trump's just enjoying himself. And yes, he does want some revenge. I think she wants major revenge. I don't think she has gotten over one, the way her husband was treated, and two, the fact that the FBI rifled through her underwear drawer at Mar-a-Lago
I don't blame her
and
one
searched
bit.
her son's room also. I think
Yes.
she is ready, and she sent a message with that outfit that this time we're getting even. So that was my only
Yes,
other
no.
impression.
Yeah, I mean, she's gorgeous as always, and I mean, you cannot find someone whose fashion sense is classier than hers. It just doesn't exist. But she was a vibe all into herself, and it's one that I know, at least for me, as a mom, when people have come after your babies and you are just done, that's what that was.
Yeah.
100%. She's it's just done in the best, classiest way possible, but it looked like, she would go take someone out and turn around and walk away and file her nails and go on about her day, like she just doesn't care. And I love that for her. And I love that for them. And I love that she embodied that so well, because even Trump, I thought it was interesting. Last fashion commentary before we move on, he came out in a purple tie, and he's always in his suit and red tie, always with this bright red tie. And I thought that was a really interesting pick. I don't know if it was to distinguish between first term and second term, to have something different, but I also wondered if it may have symbolized, purple being a combination of red and blue, like in this. He was talking a lot about unity, of course, dealing with the things that need to be dealt with, but also we have to unify as a country. And I thought that was interesting too. Even his tone, though, was much less sing-songy in his inaugural speech and much more pointed. Um, and so it all went together so well, so well. But yeah, the memes from Melania's fashion choice, especially for the inaugural swearing in, was are by far the best. So to the executive orders, anything that jumps out to you, or anything you think outside of some of the obvious ones, like rescinding or rolling back, not rescinding, but rolling back some of the Biden era policies and some things like that. Which ones to you were the most impactful and important? There were so many, but um
Well, I mean, there is and I had heard this, that people would be surprised how strongly he would come out against DEI from the get-go. And I don't think everybody fully understands how this went down. So in the afternoon, he signed an executive order that rescinded, I don't know how many, 30 or 40 prior executive orders by Biden. Two of those 30 executive orders were Biden's racial equity agenda in the federal government. So right out from I think that's something he signed in the stadium, the indoor stadium, the Capital One Center or something like that, um, on the stage with 10,000 people cheering. That was one he signed, and so that was big because that undid two Biden executive orders, one from 2021 and one from 2023, which pushed DEI into every nook and cranny of the federal government. That was gone. Then that night, he signed another executive order prohibiting DEI or use of race in federal contracting. And that is pretty huge, because the federal government and federal programs, because federal government just reaches everywhere. And people don't realize that there were a lot of the problems. Now, at Equal Protection Project, we never sued on any of those programs. We had so much else to do, but that was kind of like on our to do for the future. People don't realize how many federal grant programs have discriminatory eligibility that is then forced onto universities and others who want to get the money. But the biggest one to me was what he signed, I think it was Wednesday night, which eliminates, I'm sorry, and the one he signed Monday night also eliminated the DEI offices, okay, in the federal government. And so on Tuesday, a memo circulates from Office of Management and Budget, who run the personnel department, telling all the DEI people to leave by 5 p.m. Now they are getting paid. That's a different story. But leave, okay? We're shutting your office, leave. And then on Wednesday night, he signs what I think is, for what we do in the world we live in, which is not federal contracting, the most potentially impactful, which is focusing on higher education and the private sector, and opening up a call for the Department of Justice to identify 9 of the worst offenders and make an example of them. And also to examine whether discriminatory practices at universities and companies and foundations, important foundations, because a lot of the programs we've challenged at EPP are funded by foundations but run through universities. And that the mere fact that the university has discriminatory practices, even if it is not in a federal program, could result in the loss of federal funding. And that's always been our position. That's always been our position. That if, but it's never been enforced and it's never been, implemented. That has a potential, and I think we're already seeing it, to really frighten particularly higher ed, because federal money is the elephant in every room when it comes to higher education. The universities cannot, for the most part, survive without it. And if there is a discriminatory practice, not even using federal funding, that could cost a university hundreds of millions of dollars a year, this is going to have a huge impact. We don't know how far it will go. It's not going to end DEI. And this is something I think we need to talk about. People think this is the end of DEI. It's not. It may be the end of some DEI practices, You may not see scholarships in the future that say, only people of color need apply. You probably won't see it so grotesquely as we do now, but it's still going to happen behind the scenes. And the DEI ideology is still going to be there. Nothing is going to prevent the universities from pushing the group identity ideology that they have been pushing. They may not be able to implement it in a grotesquely uh, discriminatory manner, but I think that that is going to be an issue. So Trump's DEI sequence of executive orders is impactful in itself, may have an even bigger impact, but it is not going to end DEI. It may end DEI as we've known it, but it is not going to get it off the campuses. And I know at Equal Protection Project and our criticalrace.org project, we're going to continue to focus on those core ideological and cultural battles on campuses that are not really addressed by the executive orders, nor can they be addressed by the executive orders. It's a culture on the campuses that needs to change.
Oh, 100%. I mean, you and I wrote an op ed about this no, summer before last at this point, right? Year and a half ago, talking about how in places where DEI had become a hot button issue, a lot of schools were actively rebranding it. And we know how leftism and progressivism in our country works, which is that the ideas never go away. They just repackage them and repurpose them and present them as though there's something different, even though it's the exact same thing we've seen over and over again. I mean, whether that's abortion and what they call it. Now, you don't ever hear abortion talked about as abortion, right? It's always pro choice. And the same thing with all of the climate nonsense. You know, how many times has that been repackaged over the decades, called something different when it's really the exact same thing? And it's just a means for an agenda that they're trying to push. So we know that's how this works, and we know it's not going away. And like you just said, it's a very important point to make, and a very important thing that I want people to understand is that you can't eradicate an ideology via executive order. Now, it certainly helps to remove some of the incentive in perpetuating this, but it's not going away. The people who push for this stuff are true believers in this many times, and they believe this is the only way. They genuinely believe that this will help right America's ills, and that the only way to do that is to punish certain races over others for various historical settings that really are not at all applicable to modern day. Um, and so the work there, there's just so much to be done. And in some ways, I think it gives us a lot more work because now we have an administration for the first time ever who is on our side since we've been doing this, or who believes similarly in trying to root out as much of this as we can. Um, it's going to make our work a little bit more labor intensive and trying to dig in and find some of this stuff, but the work is still there to be done aplenty. Um, I think there were a handful of things on the executive order front that I thought were very interesting. Of course, pulling out of who was a big deal. Um, and I think too, even some of the administrative freezes, I think that's one executive order that was very important. And even though it's not as sexy as some of the others, the fact that he basically froze all administrative guidance coming out of these federal agencies is a very big deal, because especially since the Obama years, we've seen a tremendous amount of governing through bureaucracy. I know we've talked about this before. It's a particular pet peeve of mine. And at the time, I worked in immigration law, and I saw this constantly where Obama couldn't get what he wanted legislatively. And so then he would just govern through the bureaucracy itself. He would go to these agencies and issue guidance, and then that became the way things were done extra legally. And so to be able to put a halt to that is a really big deal for this unelected bureaucratic governance. And it also protects what he's trying to accomplish by disallowing people from pushing through agendas and things like that that might be contra to what he's trying to accomplish here. So, I mean, I think that is not something that got near as much play as pulling out of who and the DEI stuff, but it's a hugely important piece of what he's trying to accomplish here. Um, so nominations. Why don't we
Yeah, I mean, I
just
think one, let me just jump back to one of the executive orders that we
okay,
haven't talked
sure.
about, which is
Sure.
the birthright citizenship.
Oh yeah.
Um, I think that already a judge has put a restraining order on it. And I hope it gets to the Supreme Court because, contrary to popular media mythology, the Supreme Court has never, to my knowledge, um, determined whether someone unlawfully in the country who has a child here, that child is automatically a citizen. The case that everybody points to is a case involving permanent resident aliens, people who were here legally and had permanent status. Uh, the Supreme Court's never said this was something that was created really uh, politically, not through the Constitution, that if you can run across the Mexican border and give birth to a child here completely illegally, that child's now a citizen. That has never been a Supreme Court holding. It's never been.
And most
And
countries don't allow that. Like, for
no,
context, most countries do not allow that, and it's one of the things that this stuff that drives me nuts is we have an expectation that America bend over backwards for everyone, where other countries do not have that kind of reciprocity. They're very strict, they're very tough, they're very stringent, and we're not.
yeah, and that has been a huge incentive. I mean, there's the whole um, uh, birthright tourism, which I think is mostly from Asia. I'm not 100% sure of that, but I believe so, where people actually purchase vacation packages and they come to mostly, I think, California a month before giving birth. They're put up in a hotel. They give birth here and they head back to wherever they came from, and their child's now an American citizen. You combine that with family reunification issues. Now the whole family comes over. You combine that with protests about breaking up families. The child is now an American citizen. You're going to deport the parents, and the parents choose not to take the child with them. That's the part that's never discussed. Okay, and so it's hugely important, and just so people know it, and I have only read up on this. I won't say I've studied it, like I studied the uh, natural born citizen requirement to be president. I wrote an extremely lengthy article about that 10 years ago, when I forget who it was. It might have been Marco Rubio and a couple of other Republicans were challenged as to whether they could run for
And Ted
president.
Cruz. They were challenging
Ted
Ted
Cruz.
Cruz, who is Canadian or lived in Canada, or I can't remember
Yeah,
exactly the details.
so that I did study, and there is no clear answer on that. There is no contemporaneous statements by the framers of the Constitution on natural born citizenship. There's just not, no matter what people say on the internet. But there is when it comes to birthright citizenship. There is apparently, I haven't gone back to the original documents, but people have quoted it, statements by the people who framed the 14th Amendment that the term in the 14th Amendment, subject to the jurisdiction thereof. So any person born in the United States and subject to the jurisdiction thereof. That was an amendment clearly intended to make sure that freed black slaves were treated as citizens. Okay.
Right.
Um, but the jurisdiction was not meant to be the sort of temporary, transient, unlawful jurisdiction or unlawful presence in the country. It was meant essentially for people who were not citizens of any other country, like the freed black slaves. Okay, and so I'm not. I am. Do not believe these people who say this is an open and shut case. I don't know whether the Supreme Court will take it. I don't know how it will get to them, when it will get to them. But if they rule on it, I think there is a serious possibility they will look to the language and what was meant by the term jurisdiction at the time it was drafted. And I think they can find out. I think they can reach the conclusion, whether they will or not, I don't know, can reach the conclusion that someone unlawfully in the country or in the country lawfully but only temporarily, like a tourist, you're here on a tourist
Mhm.
visa, um, is not entitled to birthright citizenship for their children. And they will quote the framers of the 14th Amendment and what they said jurisdiction meant at the time it was enacted. So people should not dismiss this. The judge in Washington State, I think it was, made a comment, at least as quoted in the press, that he can't believe any lawyer would actually think this is a lawful executive order. Okay,
Right.
and sorry, you may disagree. The Supreme Court may disagree, but it is not a completely frivolous argument because it's never actually been determined by the Supreme Court.
And I think this is a perfect time to have this discussion. I look forward to this legal debate. I hope it's challenged. And like you said, I hope it goes to the Supreme Court because this has been a way in which people have completely exploited our system for decades now, and we need an answer on this.
And it's complete political exploitation. It's not principled. Okay, it's complete political exploitation. By the time it reaches the Supreme Court, I'm not making a prediction, but I'm putting out a possibility. It might be a 7-2 um, Supreme Court, not a 6-3. Not that the
Right.
six have been consistent. I mean, Amy Coney Barrett and the chief judge have been, you never know which way they're going to go. But at the inauguration, the justices were all there. And I got to tell you, Justice Sotomayor did not look well. Okay.
No,
I'm
she
not
didn't.
predicting anything, but she did not look well. She could barely walk. Her face, she just looked very unhealthy.
Yeah.
And so I'm just putting that out there that this is going to take a year or two, I think, to get to the Supreme Court. Might get there sooner, but it's going to take a year probably. Uh, who knows what the court will look like then?
No, I mean, I completely agree. And I think too, national tides have turned on this issue. I think had this come up 10, 15 years ago, there would have been a lot more sympathy towards, and I dealt with this quite a bit in my immigration law career where the dreamers, right, is what they called them because Obama passed, or was it Obama that passed the Dream Act, or was that a W thing? But which is just such a political way of couching all of that too. That these kids who come over, and I get it, like we grew up overseas. I couldn't have said, no, mom, dad, I'm not going with you to whatever country we were getting transferred to, right? I understand that and I'm sympathetic to that. But the thing is, what happens here is these people purposely bring their children into an uncertain situation that they will then be able to petition for themselves because of their child's status. That's wrong. It's just wrong. It's in defiance of the spirit of the law. It's in defiance of our national sovereignty. And I am not unsympathetic to leaving harsh conditions, but I think we have a very different national tone on immigration thanks to what Biden and his administration did in opening the borders and allowing so many violent criminals and all of these. I mean, we don't even know how many millions of people are in our country illegally. And I love that the administration changed the verbiage back to illegal because that is correct. I think was it Ron DeSantis who corrected a reporter on that yesterday? The reporter had asked him a question about undocumented immigrants, and he corrected them and
Well,
said, "No, they're illegal."
okay. So talking about language, I've added two things to my bucket list. One is to climb Mount McKinley, and the other is to wade into the Gulf of America.
Yeah. My kids were very confused about this. They're like, but because of course I was jokingly calling and vying for it being called the Gulf of Texas, which would make a lot of sense for us since like we live an hour away from it. Um, but that it's the Gulf of America, and my daughter, who's 8, was just shaking her head. She goes, "Well, I guess I'm gonna have to remember what it's called now because we just finished this geography lesson." So now all of our maps and all of our globes, they just got a smart globe for Christmas. They're all out of date, but whatever. That's the way it goes. That's the way it goes. I love that he did that though. It's a small thing, and I know people think it's trivial, but it's really not.
No,
It's
it's
just
not.
stamping and marking things that belong to us in ways that have not been done since like the great westward expansion.
Yeah, well,
So,
hey, you know what? Greenland is going to happen.
yeah,
Okay,
I think
how
so
what
too.
it looks like remains to be seen. I'm predicting American Samoa as the model, which is a lesser status than like Puerto Rico. It's U.S. control, but completely independent administration. They have to apply. They are not automatically American citizens, and they do not vote in presidential elections or congressional elections. So, basically, an American security umbrella, undoubtedly some level of American support, but we're only talking about 50,000 people. We're not talking about 50 million
Right.
people. Some level of American financial support, American security support. I think Greenland's happening. I don't think Denmark's going to be able to stop it. I don't think they have the stomach to stop it. And something is going to happen with Greenland. It can't afford to be its own country. So it's got to be affiliated with somebody. And I think it's happening. He's also put on the table Panama Canal.
Yeah.
Uh, and Panama went running to the United Nations over that, which is kind of hysterical. Okay,
It
not
is
that we've
really
done
funny.
anything, but his comment that we're getting it back. Okay, and but I think that's a negotiating ploy. I don't think he's sending American troops there. I think it's a negotiating ploy to get Panama to kick China out of the
Yeah, I
canal.
think so too. I do
The
too.
price of not going to quote unquote some level of war with the U.S., most likely economic war, um, for Panama will be getting the Chinese out of the canal. Okay,
Yes.
and so I think that's happening too. But I don't think we're sending paratroopers to grab control of the canal. I don't think we should, but we do have a right to apparently.
We
Uh, and,
built it.
and
We built it.
well, no, but there, from what my understanding is, and anybody watching can correct me if I'm wrong, but I don't think I am. There are actually two treaties. One is the
Right.
treaty that we gave the canal back, not back. We gave the canal to Panama. We built it.
Yeah.
We gave it to them, not back. Gave it to
And
them.
I'm fairly certain, and again, you can correct me on this, that it was Jimmy Carter because my entire childhood, my dad was still complaining about how Jimmy Carter gave the Panama Canal away.
Yeah. But the second one gives us defense rights um, to protect the canal from foreign domination and influence, which was really exactly for this type of scenario. That
Right.
and so it, my understanding is that second treaty does give us uh, the right to militarily protect the canal from foreign influence. So it's not violation of a treaty. But I don't think it's going to come to that. I mean, I don't, and I don't think we should, occupy the canal. I don't think we need that. But I think he is right that it is a strategic asset and resource, and China should not be running it. Canada, I think he's just purely tweaking Canada. Okay, that's all
Oh,
he's.
yeah.
I don't think he wants Canada. At his speech yesterday to at Davos for the World Economic Forum, he referred to Canada as a potential state, just to go. Okay, that Canada is just fun. Okay, and trolling. Greenland and Panama Canal are not. I think those are
I
serious.
agree. Yeah, I agree. I completely agree. I think that'll be interesting to see how that shakes out. And I think you're 100% correct that he's very good at doing that, about going on an international stage and basically sending a message to different people in various ways, like he's doing with this Panama thing. We've seen him do that a gazillion times, and it's effective. It always works for him because I think at the end of the day, they know that he's serious and he's not playing around. So any last thoughts? I mean, I know there's so much to talk about 5 days into this, but in the interest of brevity, do you want to should we touch on lastly the nominations and where they are and what we have coming? For me, I cannot wait. I'll have plenty of popcorn ready for this RFK hearing coming up this next week. Um, that is going to be such, like, I can't even, if he's taking on big pharma and which the entirety of Congress is in bed with, or at least the Democrats are. It's just gonna be so many fireworks. I can't wait. Um,
Yeah. Hegseth is
nomination.
supposed to get a vote today. Do we know whether that's happened yet?
I don't know. I have not looked
But
since we have
it
been
looks like,
chatting.
I mean, he had 51 votes. So I think I think he's getting a vote today. Of course, Murkowski and Collins came out against him, but what's his name? Oh God, I've forgotten his name. The former majority leader, Mitch McConnell, voted for him,
Oh yeah.
at least on that procedural vote. So, and remember that the vice president can break a tie. So we would need to lose two more people beyond Collins and Murkowski on him. I've not heard that that's going to be an issue, so I think Hegseth will get through. I can't imagine Bondi won't. I can't really imagine anyone who's gone through the hearing process yet not getting through. The Democrats are just slow walking everything. All the things we never did to them. Okay, they're making us go through these 30 hours to wait on a vote. You know, all those sort of nonsense that Schumer is doing that we never did to them. Just shows that being nice does not get reciprocated. I shouldn't say never, but we didn't do it as a matter of routine to them. Okay, just to slow it down. That's what they did on all our judicial nominations. We didn't do that for them just for the sake of slowing it down. There might have been particular individuals. So I think Trump's going to basically get his cabinet. The two big ones left are obviously RFK that are controversial, RFK Jr. and also uh, Tulsi Gabbard. So I think we'll see what happens with those. But I guess those are next week.
I just so many things keep rolling in. I mean, I think just today Trump he did I have to throw this in completely savagely too as part of his executive orders withdraw security clearance for so many of these people who are all over cable news talking about, constantly maligning Trump and his administration. And he also withdrew Fauci's security detail. And he said that he's made a lot of money. He can pay for his own security, which is
Yeah,
just, I mean,
I'm not sure I agree with that. Whether you like him or not, he is being threatened by Iran because of the role he played in Trump's first administration on Iran policy. And I do, again, it's you don't have to like them, you can hate them, whatever. But I just think it's very bad when we don't protect our own people who are threatened by a foreign regime for what you did while you were in the administration, not something you did privately. So I don't agree with that. Maybe we didn't need the level of security for him, but there are confirmed plots by the Iranian government to kill him, to kill Trump, to kill other American officials who were involved in Iran policy in the first Trump administration. And so that's one I disagree with. And I think we owe it to people who serve in our government, um, who are then targeted because of their service in the government. To provide them with protection, particularly at that high level where it's a malign foreign actor like Iran. So that may be the only thing he's done this week that I disagree with, but I do disagree with that.
no, and I mean, I think that's fair. I think that's fair. And I'm curious to see what happens with government security anyway. I mean, we know that Trump hired a private security firm to assist with security at the inauguration. Which I mean, honestly, after the assassination attempts that the Secret Service did little, if anything, to stop, I don't blame him at all. I'd want my own people there too, until I could get in and properly clean house. So I don't know. I think there's so many changes afoot, but it seems like I think the overall theme here is that these people who continue to leech on to the government, whether it's financially or information wise, um, long after they've been in service, will no longer have that opportunity, at least not while Trump is in office. And I don't think overall that's a bad thing. I mean, Fauci might be a different situation, but I don't think that's a bad thing that we're cutting people loose when they're done serving. You shouldn't have benefits in perpetuity. Nowhere else do you get that. Why would you have that when you're supposed to be a servant of the people? And so we were able to confirm that it looks like Hegseth will be voted on later tonight. Um, and then Nome will get a cloture vote. So um, I think that's where we are on those. Of course, Rubio is confirmed. Quite a few, or a handful of them, I think, have already been confirmed. But it's a brave new world ahead of us, and I'm excited about that and what everything looks like moving forward too. I think it's a lot of good, but like we've talked about, there has been so much damage and so much work that has to be done to right this. I'm at least very relieved to see that he is very seriously taking action swiftly, knowing how serious the condition of our country is right now. So, but I think that wraps it up, unless you have any parting thoughts.
No, day five. Day five. We've got somebody help me with the math here. It's 1,461 total, and we're in day five. So we have, please help me with the math here.
1457.
55 more days, or
Yeah.
56 more days.
So yeah, it's gonna be a long, hard road, but you know what? We need this. We need this now more than ever. So I'm very grateful. I'm thankful that we still have some hope as a nation. I feel better about life always being in Texas, um, just because I do. But yeah, it's nice to know that America's not completely and totally lost yet. So, and with that, um, definitely, if you appreciate what we have to say, and if you enjoy listening to our podcast, please share, like, click all the thumbs up buttons wherever you are enjoying our content, um, and be sure to check us out. We have links to everything that we have discussed, because we cover all of this on the blog at legalinsurrection.com, and you can find out more about everything we discussed in this episode and so much more at legalinsurrection.com/21. And that's a wrap for today, and hopefully we'll be back to chat with y'all next week. Bye bye.